of both the Intelligence and Foreign Relations Committees, Republican Senator James Risch of Idaho. Senator, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you very much. Spoiler alert, I take a little different view of this than the interviews you've done so far. But
all right, well, we're going to let's get to those different perspectives. Let me ask you a few questions, and you'll share the latest information that you have. Legality aside, Senator, was it appropriate for the president to share highly classified information with the Russian foreign minister, the Russian ambassador to the United States? Information apparently so sensitive that it wasn't even broadly shared within the U.S. government or with key U.S. allies.
Wolf, you can't put legality aside. First of all, it was absolutely legal. The President of the United States has the legal authority to declassify and discuss classified information at any time for any reason to anyone he wants to.
It was definitely legal.
Wolf, let me finish.
Hold on a second.
Let me finish.
Hold on. Let me just point out. It was definitely legal, but was it the right thing to do?
Yes. And now if you'll let me finish the answer.
Go ahead.
The President of the United States has the obligation to meet with heads of state of all kinds of countries, whether they're our adversaries or whether they are our allies, and to discuss with them threats to our country, to their country, and how we can work together to deconflict those things. These news reports you've been putting out acts as if this was a one-off, a unique thing. Presidents have done this regularly. Indeed, President Obama, less than a year ago, took in his pocket the thousands and thousands of classified facts he had, just like all of us have in the intelligence community, met with the Russians, and disclosed classified information to the Russians, and that was that Russians, we know you are attempting to interfere with U.S. elections. That was a classified fact. He declassified it and talked to the Russians about it, and that was the declassification, the very fact that he talked to them about it. He disclosed it to them, and there's no criticism of that, and there shouldn't be.
Well, here's
the President
the
of the United States has the obligation to
Senator,
disclose those facts when it's in the best interest of the United States.
There's one difference in doing that. In a lengthy series of meetings with the top security officials, the top members of the intelligence community, and going through what if the U.S. were to disclose this kind of information to the Russians. It's another thing for the president just off the top to go ahead and decide to release this kind of information, not even knowing the source of the information and the potential complications, as we heard from his national security advisor today.
Yeah, well, if I can tell you, picking up the thousands of pieces of classified information that I do, the sources and methods are almost never disclosed unless they are particularly relevant to a danger in the future. So whether the president knew the sources and methods, I don't know. But also you got to remember, it was not the president of the United States that caused this. It was some traitor who's in the chain of command below the president who actually discloses. The focus has all been on a legal act and an appropriate act that the president did, and for some reason, the national media is not in any way focusing on a very illegal and compromising thing that somebody did that has put the national security of America at risk.
Who's the traitor?
I don't know who it is. I don't know who it is, but when they find that person, they ought to be treated appropriately.
Do you know if the president or any of his aides notified the Israelis in advance, we're going to share this information with the Russians, information that your sources gave you at great risk? We decided we're going to share this with the Russians. Was there any advance word to the Israelis?
That's a great question, Wolf, and I can tell you this. I don't know whether they did or whether they didn't, but I can tell you the protocol is that we do not ordinarily notify whatever the source was that we're going to use it to our advantage in some particular situation. We share intelligence information with all but about 2 countries on the face of this planet. We get it, we give it to them. It is not protocol, and the media stories have been coming out saying that, oh, they should have notified whoever it was that gave us this information, assuming it wasn't ours, and I'm neither going to confirm or deny that, but it is not protocol to go back to a country that has given us information and we say, oh, we're going to use it now, and this is how we're going to use it. Here's
the problem. I've heard this, Senator. I want your reaction from Israelis. The Israelis get this information, very sensitive information, give it to the United States. The United States then gives the information to the Russians. As you know, the Russians are working very closely in Syria with the Iranians, with Hezbollah, 2 enemies of Israel. The Israelis all of a sudden get very nervous that all of a sudden the information they shared with the U.S. Iranians might get that information from the Russians. Hezbollah, the Lebanese group, might get that information from the Russians. Does that concern you?
2 points. First of all, you heard what the Israeli ambassador has said. I believe it. This is not going to cause any issues between us and the Israelis. The second thing is, if indeed what was spoken about, and I'm not going to confirm or deny that, and that was airline safety, that is something that we, the Russians, the Israelis, and every other civilized country in the world are concerned about, and it is frequent that information, particularly sensitive information, particularly classified information, is shared from country to country as to how to make an airline trip safe. Because you don't fly just in one country. Frequently, you fly from country to country, and it's important that every single intelligence agency in the world that's interested in airline safety be fully engaged, be fully informed on what's going on. So this thing's way blown out of proportion when it comes to who's going to be upset about this.
All right, Senator, there's much more to discuss. I want you to stay with us. We're going to take a quick break. Much more with Senator Risch right after this. Our breaking news, very defiant. President Trump says he has the absolute right to share intelligence with Russia, and his top officials are downplaying any possible damage from a security breach. But we're also learning that a close U.S. ally, Israel, was the source of intelligence the president gave away to a U.S. adversary, Russia. There's growing alarm right now. There's outrage up on Capitol Hill, where the CIA director is briefing lawmakers this hour. We're back with Republican Senator James Risch of Idaho. He's a member of both the Intelligence and Foreign Relations Committees. Senator, last July, you'll remember this, you signed onto a letter requesting the State Department immediately suspend the security clearance of Hillary Clinton. That letter said her actions were grossly negligent, damaged national security, put lives at risk. Should President Trump be held to that same standard?
Well, Wolf, we started this program like this. One of those two people has the legal right, in fact, the legal obligation to disclose and to declassify information to whoever they want. The other person you're talking about, Hillary Clinton, had no legal right to do that, and indeed it was inappropriate in the way that was done. You're mixing apples and oranges here. There is no question that the president has the legal right to do this, and I would argue the moral right to do it and the obligation to do it when he believes that it will save American lives, that it is in the interest of the American people, that it's in the interest of national security, that he discuss and disclose information that we have that will help our interests.
But his aides say he didn't do it knowingly. He wasn't aware of the sensitivity of this information he was passing along to the Russian foreign minister and the Russian ambassador. That's a problem, isn't it?
Not at all. What difference does it make whether he did it knowingly or unknowingly? It was a fact that he wanted to discuss with the Russians that would improve airline safety, if indeed that's what it was all about. He made the decision to do that. He has the legal right and the obligation to do that.
Here's the problem, though, and U.S. officials are making this point, and I'm sure they've made it to you. When you disclose information that potentially could reveal how that information was obtained, sensitive information, lives are on the line. And that's why news organizations like CNN, like the Washington Post in this particular case, have declined to report certain information after the intelligence community says, you know what, if you report that, lives could be lost. That's a sensitive issue. You can't just willy-nilly go ahead and release that kind of information.
Well, of course not. And if President Trump had stood up and revealed just what to the public, just what he did in a classified setting with those foreign leaders that he wanted to discuss those things with, we could have this argument about whether it was appropriate to disclose publicly. That's not what he did. Look, again, I come back to here, there's a weasel here, and the weasel is not the President of the United States. It's the traitor who disclosed these facts to the Washington Post. I wish you'd go out and interview the Washington Post and ask them to disclose who that is.
Well, those were confidential sources, as you well know.
Yeah.
Senator, let me get into it quickly, very quickly, into another aspect. This entire controversy comes as the president is preparing for his first foreign trip. He leaves Friday for Saudi Arabia.
Right.
Then he's going to Jerusalem. It will include a stop in Israel, as you know. So
Right.
far, this is very sensitive. The White House has refused to say whether the Trump administration believes that the Western Wall, the holiest site in Judaism, is part of Israel. Do you, Senator, do you believe the Western Wall in the old city of Jerusalem is part of Israel?
Yes.
Do you think the White House should acknowledge that, should make that statement, that same point?
I'm not going to tell the White House what to do. You heard where I am on it, Wolf, and I'm firm on that. The White House is going to have to take that obligation. And by the way, this trip that's coming up is a huge deal. You heard McMaster review the details, and I don't know whether anyone was paying attention because they wanted to get to the end of his press conference where they could ask him about the conversations with the Russians. But look, he's going to meet with the heads of 50 Muslim states in Saudi Arabia. 50 Muslim countries. This is a big deal that's coming up this trip. Not only Saudi Arabia, but then Israel, also to the Vatican and to the European nations. This is something that really deserves the attention of the national media.
Senator Risch, thanks as usual for joining us.
Thank you very much, Wolf. I'm glad to have been with you.
Yeah, we always appreciate your being here in the Situation Room. Thank
you.
you. Coming up, the latest information.